It should have stayed a podcast. That's how the New York Times ends its review of Lockbox. After watching it, I think that's only half the story. Lockbox is a 2026 horror film from Daniel Stamm, the director of The Last Exorcism. It stars Carla Gugino, Taylor Pucci, and Katharine Isabelle. It adapts a single episode of Knifepoint Horror, a cult podcast with over 10 million downloads. The original episode runs 72 minutes. Just one voice, no music, no sound effects, no jump scares. So, did it work? The Atmosphere essay nailed the problem. A medium defined by showing must carry material whose entire charge comes from not showing. Professional reviews were largely negative. Rotten Tomatoes, 29%. IMDb, 5.2. Letterboxd, 2.6 out of 5. Early online audiences are mixed to negative, though the vote counts are low. The Knifepoint community, however, seemed considerably more receptive. That's the interesting part. Let's get into it. Carla Gugino plays Ellen Hirschbergen. After her mother's death, she retreats to a quiet town in upstate New York. She buys a house, volunteers at the local church, and tries to find some peace. Then a relative asks her to take in her adult cousin, Winthrop, played by Taylor Pucci. Winthrop is an Army veteran with severe PTSD, sleepwalking, secretive, a short fuse, a visible burn scar. He's withdrawn but grateful. Ellen hasn't seen him since childhood. Then Vanna arrives. Katharine Isabelle plays Vanna Minter, an eccentric neighbor with white braided hair. She overshares about horrific childhood abuse. She inserts herself into Ellen's home uninvited, and she warns Ellen that Winthrop is dangerous. Here's the core idea. A demonic entity attaches itself to people weakened by trauma. It doesn't choose at random. It chooses the broken. Combat veterans, abuse survivors, because trauma leaves them vulnerable. The Lockbox is a person who can contain that entity inside their own mind and body. Hold it prisoner. Evil can't be expelled. It has to be transferred. That is a genuinely interesting premise. The problem is what the film does with it. And for most of its runtime, that's not enough. Carla Gugino is the anchor. Nearly every critic, even the ones who hated the movie, agreed. Glenn Kenny and Roger Ebert wrote she absolutely deserves better than this. The Times called her reliably empathetic and kind-eyed. Behind the Lens said she was simply superb. She plays a woman who gave up her career to nurse her dying mother, then takes on another damaged person because she can't stop caring. Gugino never overplays it. Just exhaustion, quiet resilience, and love. Taylor Pucci plays Winthrop. He's divisive. Disappointment Media called him the major standout, a deeply disturbed man whose silence says far more than his words. Others found him stranded. Reviews and Dunn said Winthrop is more frustrating than compelling. My view, Pucci's commitment shows. He semi-starved himself for the role. But the script doesn't give him enough to work with. And then there's Katharine Isabelle. She plays Vanna with what Kenny called tornado-like energy. She's a horror icon. Ginger snaps. That brings us to the podcast, because the podcast is why this film exists and why it's so polarizing. Knifepoint Horror is an anthology series from the pseudonymous Soren Narnia. It started in 2010. Over 10 million downloads. Part of Elijah Wood's SpectreVision radio network. It's defined by extreme minimalism. No music, no sound design, no theme song, no ads, just a voice telling a horror story in first person. Flat register, about an hour. The episode adapted is number 52, The Lockbox, released December 2019. 72 minutes. Narnia co-wrote the film. He promoted it on his own podcast. But here's the tension. I think the podcast works because it withholds. You don't see the monster. You don't hear it. Your imagination fills the gap. Film can't do that. The camera has to show you something. I think that gap is exactly what many critics reacted against. The Times said it should have stayed a podcast. The fans were more forgiving. On the Knifepoint subreddit, one fan wrote, "I was pleasantly surprised. It stayed close enough to be recognizable, but diverged enough to be novel." Another wrote, "The slow pace and blank spaces horror won't work that well for the screen." Honestly, both reactions make sense. The film is faithful. It also can't replicate what made the podcast work. Critics judged it as a film. Fans judged it as an adaptation. Two valid lenses, completely different conclusions. Which brings us to the most contested part, the trauma. The film says demonic entities attach to the traumatized. PTSD is a doorway. Childhood abuse is a doorway. Combat trauma is a doorway. The entity picks the broken. Fandom Wire gave it 1 out of 10. Called it offensive. Their argument, boiling down this experience to literal demons, is not only in poor taste but also comes across as offensive. Glenn Kenny said the treatment of mental illness is indifferent to crass and always at least borderline offensive. That's a fair criticism. The film uses PTSD as a plot device, a mechanism for supernatural horror, without fully engaging with what PTSD actually is. Compare that to Hereditary. Grief is an inescapable inheritance. The Babadook, the monster is the grief. Smile. Trauma as a contagious curse. Those films integrate trauma into their mythology. Lockbox uses trauma as a selection criterion. The demon picks traumatized people because they're easier to possess. That's a plot mechanic, not a thematic argument. And yet, the Lockbox concept, containing evil instead of expelling it, is genuinely interesting. Gazetley wrote the film, accidentally found a much harsher movie about damaged people being valued for their capacity to absorb suffering. That's a devastating idea. The film raises it, but I don't think it explores it deeply enough. One great idea. I'm just not sure the film knows what to do with it. And the reception tells the story. Rotten Tomatoes sets a 29% from 21 reviews. IMDb at 5.2 from 240 votes. Letterboxd at 2.6 from about 700 ratings. No Metacritic. No reported box office. Almost nobody saw it, and most who did weren't impressed. The reviews are mostly negative. Roger Ebert called it supernatural hoo-ha. The Times called it a silly supernatural thriller. Screen anarchy, enjoyable yet ultimately unfulfilling. A few positives. Heaven of Horror gave it 4 out of 5. Much better than I expected. Behind the lens, unnervingly effective. My honest synthesis. Lockbox has a genuinely interesting premise. Trauma as a doorway, the Lockbox as a prison. It has a cast better than the material. Gugino is superb. Pucci is committed. Isabelle is electric. It has a director who knows how to build atmosphere, and it has source material that is genuinely terrifying. But the film is slow, the middle act drags, the PTSD framing is underexplored and arguably offensive. The third act devolves into supernatural hoo-ha. The Lockbox concept is raised, but not fully explored. And the fundamental problem, stretching a 72-minute audio monologue into a 105-minute movie, is visible in every frame. So here's the verdict. Lockbox is a flawed film with one great idea it doesn't fully use. Gugino performs above the material. Isabelle is the most interesting thing in it. Pucci is committed but underserved. The podcast is terrifying, the film is not. The Knifepoint faithful, who brought context, were kinder. Both reactions are understandable, and this isn't the end. A second Knifepoint horror film, Fiona, directed by Nicholas McCarthy, began shooting in Toronto in May 2026. Same producers, same distribution path. The podcast-to-film pipeline is moving forward. The question is whether the next adaptation can solve what Lockbox couldn't. How do you translate the dread of a voice in your headphones into the dread of an image on a screen? Lockbox is available to rent or buy on Apple TV, Amazon, and Fandango at home. MGM Plus streaming is expected this fall. If you're a Knifepoint fan, watch it. You'll find more to like than the critics did. If you're a general horror viewer, wait for the rental. And if you've never listened to Knifepoint Horror, I'd say go listen to the podcast. The episode is The Lockbox. 72 minutes, better than the movie. Here's my question for you. What podcast, fiction or non-fiction, do you think would make a great movie? And the harder question, can any audio-only horror story survive the translation to film? Or is the genre fundamentally incompatible with visual adaptation? Lockbox tried. The Times said it should have stayed a podcast. What do you say? I know where I land. I'll put it in a pinned comment. I want to see yours. If you've seen both, tell me which one scared you more. If you haven't, start with the movie and then experience the podcast.